1, 0, and liftoff.
Welcome to Mission Control, Peralta Design's podcast on all things branding and digital marketing. Since 2008, Peralta Design has launched hundreds of brands with award-winning identities and websites. Join our hosts Ramon and Jorge as they use decades of combined experience to tackle topics with past clients, industry partners, and the rest of the PD crew. At Peralta Design, we launch brands. But for now, let's launch right into this episode of Mission Control.
Welcome to Mission Control, where we respect the grind and reclaim the American dream. I am your host, Ramon Peralta from Peralta Design, and we launch brands. And I want to remind everyone to subscribe and like and review our podcast. We have some very exciting guests today, especially. I'm super excited. It's a dear, dear friend, fraternity brother. This man is a scholar. Okay, he's received his doctorate in art history from Yale University. He is a professor of art history at Westfield College in Massachusetts, an incredibly gifted artist who is very, very passionate about his work, about what's going on in our world. Please help me welcome Dr. Imo Nse Imeh.
Hey, thank you, brother. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here, my brother. Thank you. Tell the audience about yourself, because you're a superhero to me, and all superheroes have these great origin stories. So start with your name, what it means, how to pronounce it, and then just give us your backstory.
My name is Imo Nse Imeh, and I'm American born. My family is from Nigeria, the Ibibio area of they're Ibibio speaking people. So they're in the southeast area of Nigeria, Akwa Ibom State. Imo means wealth of the Lord, wealth of God. Nse means looking up to God or searching for God. And Imeh means patience. So I constantly, I tell people I constantly feel like I am growing into my name, like it's like my life story of growing into my name. And I'm an associate professor of art and art history at Westfield State University. I've been there since 2009, and I never thought I'd live in Western Massachusetts, but it has been extremely beneficial for me. It's where I have my studio, a very large studio space that would be a lot more expensive if this was New York or LA or some other place. And so it's one of these old mills that's been gutted and repurposed. And it's been the perfect situation for me to unpack all of these ideas that I have. I teach art history, but I'm a visual artist. And that's an interesting component of my trajectory as an artist into the art world, the fact that I do both. And that kind of creative confusion often fuels the projects that I work on and creates a lot of havoc for people who are trying to work with me, who are like, well, what are you? And I'm like, I'm not sure. So it has been an interesting run in that way. As an introduction, I think that's fair. I teach African American art. I teach a general art survey course. My research at Yale was in a woman's initiation ritual known as Mbopo, which is characterized largely by the seclusion and fattening of girls prior to marriage. So it's very familial. My mother didn't go through it, but my grandmother did. And so it's this wonderful opportunity to dive into my culture while I was a student at Yale. And since then, my work has branched off into larger considerations of the Black body in space, larger considerations of the subjectivity of Black bodies. Right now, currently, Black male bodies in white spaces and what that looks like. And so that is, in a very large nutshell, who I am and what I do right now.
Okay, now, was art encouraged by your family, or did you say, hey, mom, check this out, and you drew a picture? Like, what was that first moment like when you realized you had this gift?
Encouraged is an interesting word when you're talking to an African child. about art. I will say this. With all of the turmoil that I grew up in, my parents made sure that anything I desired, I had. And the only thing that I really desired to do was make art. And they made a way. So beyond the divorce and separation and everything else that happened, that I feel those things have shaped me, I cannot utter a negative word about the amount of energy my parents poured into me when it came to art. They knew that I liked it. They knew I was a good kid. I was obedient as a good African child. You know, I tried my best to do well in school. If all he wants is some paper, then give him paper. You know, I believe that my mom fully believed that I would grow out of this and become a medical doctor, and my dad, I'm not sure what he thought. So encouraged is an interesting word, but I was never discouraged from it. This was such a part of my anatomy growing up that my parents just, they knew it was special, and they fueled it to the best that they could. At a very young age, I was buying my own art supplies. You know, whatever little money I would get, I knew the stores to go to. I knew. And then once I got to New York and started living with my mom, my entire world just opened up. New York City literally changed my trajectory because art was everywhere and it was welcomed. And I swam with fish for the first time when I moved to New York City. And I got my hands dirty with art everywhere. And bookstores. It was a thing when bookstores was everywhere. And I would go in and I would look at all of these expensive art books. And then once I got old enough to start buying those expensive art books, I bought them. And so anyway, trips to the Met, the Frick Museum on my own because I wanted to be there. And I believed that those creations should be open to the public in a way that, as a Black man entering these museum spaces, I always felt like there were eyes on me as a Black boy. I remember having, I remember as a high school student at the High School of Art and Design, leaving school one day, captain of the debate team, all these things that I was doing, big book bag always, because I carried my life with me. And I walked around the New York City area, the Manhattan area, and stumbled upon a gallery, one of those storefront galleries, really posh gallery in the middle of mid-Manhattan. And I saw this amazing artwork through the glass. And I was like, oh, I have to go in. I have to see what this looks, you know? So I go to the door and I try to open it, but it's one of those doors that you have to get buzzed into. And I see the lady in there and she looked at me and she's like, and I was like, oh, no, I'm an artist. And I started trying to explain to her what I wanted to do. And she looked at me, and I lived in the city long enough to know that I should be careful.
Was she afraid, you think?
She was.
Yeah.
So I debated there, do I go inside my bag and pull out my sketchbook and show her like, no, I am an artist. And then I saw my reflection in the mirror, in the glass. Yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm not gonna be able to, it's a big Black teenager.
It's like the definition of prejudice. She's judging you based on what she sees.
Yeah, but it was right around that. I bring that up because it was right around that. That's so much part of my story. Yeah. It was right around that time at a young enough age when I was like, if I'm ever in a position, I'm gonna make sure that what I do as an artist is never relegated to just somebody's institution or somebody's collection. I'm gonna make sure that the masses are able to enjoy and to learn from what I create. And that happened at a young age. So I'm kind of happy about these little hiccups that happen along the way, because I think they form me into exactly what I'm supposed to be right now.
Absolutely. Major influences of artists. I mean, for me, I was a big comic book guy. So John Romita Jr. and John Byrne, I can name a lot of comic artists, but it wasn't until college that I became a fan of Basquiat, for example, as one of my favorites. So who would you count as an influence Are they all necessarily Black artists, or do you or
No, they're not all, and some of them are nameless for me. Some of them I just loved their work when I was a kid, and I never dug into them as I got older. Comic book, I was I was I was a fake comic book appreciator. So all I wanted to do,
explain that.
all I wanted to do was was draw the covers,
Right.
right? And I didn't want to replicate what I saw. I was like, well, that's nice, but I want to do my own, So so I would make up all these comic books, and then it got really hard drawing all those lines in the middle. Anyway, comic book, big influence on my life in terms of the dramatic poses, and oh my gosh, I would go crazy.
The foreshortening of the quad muscles and things like that.
And
the fist.
How to Draw the Marvel Way.
Right. Right. Yes.
That book, it's only now, it's like, oh my gosh, that book had such an influence on so many other people. But I remember when I first saw that book, and I was like, it influenced how I draw some of the things I draw now. Like when I draw the side profile of the head, I put the nose a certain way. There's a little angle line that you draw between the tip of the nose and the chin. I still do that, even though my figures are Black and not like the ones in that book. I still do that. Then I augment it to make the full lips of a Black person. Anyway, that had an influence. In terms of artistic influences, I loved who they call the old masters. I fell in love with Michelangelo's work. I fell in love with it. I love studying his work. I love studying the work of Caravaggio. I love people who seemed to have seamlessly mastered not just anatomy, but this capacity to twist the body into the strangest forms and figures that were flying in the air, and dramatic capes and drapes that made no sense in the image, but it made it look hot. It wasn't so different from the comic book stuff.
Right, true.
Like, I'm looking at the images that I loved growing up, and mind you, I learned about these things in so many ways as I was studying the history of art. So my love affair with art history and visual art and my own influences are very, very, very intertwined, And so the drama, the high drama of Peter Paul Rubens, his work, God.
Rembrandt, the lighting, the chiaroscuro,
Yes.
These guys are painting by candlelight with oils and the dramatic shadowing and things like that.
Yeah. And high drama, high drama, like so much drama in a look, a group of people looking at something. And you're like, why would that be dramatic? But the way they paint it, I'm like, man, and I don't think people realize how much of those kinds of cultures and those artists created the kind of cinematic and theatrical dramas that we enjoy right now on screen. So much of that was created in these paintings. I think that you have a lot of people that look back and, without realizing, are copying and creating, derivations of Rubens' paintings and whatnot. So anyway, those were some influences. And then as I started getting older into high school, and I really started enjoying learning about just the story of who I am as a Black man, I started falling in love with the work of Charles White. I started falling in love with the work of Tom Feelings and John Biggers. And there were certain people who just, their work, it was usually people who knew how to draw. I identified that I didn't care about painting at some point, that I liked drawing. I liked looking at Rembrandt's drawings more than his paintings and sculptures. And so something about line work did it for me. And Charles White and John Biggers, they did something for me as an artist, as a Black man, and knowing that they were Black men and they were interpreting the world this way meant something for me as well. And of course, there was this whole social justice lens through which they created art. And there was this lens of looking back to Africa and loving Africa. That lens, all those things fueled me. So this strange marriage of Michelangelo and angelic, heavenly, beings floating around and cherubs, meet this world of Tom feelings of slaves that are literally, in the water, going from one continent to the next and so on and so forth. Very, very interesting. Everything flowed though. If you look at the works that I cared about, they all had a flow and movement. They weren't stagnant works. I've never been a portrait artist. I'm very proud of that. I like the works that use the body to tell a story.
Well, you definitely do that in your work, and I want to go back to two things: your mom, and the fact that you're a visual artist and a professor of art history. So this is a personal question: how much of the decision to make that career choice was about perhaps giving your parents a quote unquote real career versus you just venturing out there and saying, I'm going to be an artist full time? And how much of that was your own choice to kind of have a safety net, if you will, and be able to do your own creativity?
Good question. I think it's a very fair question. And I don't know the percentage, but there's no way I can say honestly that everything that you just said is not somehow threaded together. So when I got to Columbia University, I rejected the art department. They were interested. They're like, hey, you're good, right? I'm like, yeah, I know, I know that, but I just come from an art high school, I wasn't so turned on by everything I was seeing there. Loved the professors, but I was like, while I'm here, if I'm gonna do art, I should do something practical. Like, let me learn how to write, So it was always with that in the back of my head. Art history, I could still apply to law school. So it's like, right, this is
the Nigerian DNA in you coming out.
Exactly how I was thinking. Now, the thing is, I had a knack for it and I actually enjoyed art history. Yeah. So here I am, solo Black guy in like all the big classes, in the front row, asking the questions, people contacting me, the night before an exam because they know I'm going to ace it.
Why am I not surprised?
I was so into this stuff, you know? And so for me, when I applied to Yale University, this is how I thought about it. I could apply to the Yale MFA program. I think a big part of it that isn't included in that scenario you brought up is that I was afraid of rejection. I was so concerned that even that something that I love this deeply, which is making art, I was so concerned that the world would spit me out, that it would reject it, that I didn't put myself out there. And I think that had I been an art major at Columbia instead of art history major, I think I would have gained the confidence that comes with going through the rigor of critique and getting slammed. Because for me, it's art. I was that emotional art kid all through life. Like in my art classes, I would have fights with my art teachers. This is like 5th grade. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Why aren't you doing it? Because what I'm doing is better. I was very confident in what I did as an artist until I was told that it was wrong. And then I blew up. And so the fear was finding out that everything I've ever cared about isn't acceptable. And so I didn't apply to any MFA programs. I never applied to MFA programs. I only applied to doctoral programs, and I got into 2 of the 3 that I applied to. And now it was with the backing of my institutional backing from Columbia. Certainly my mom was a little concerned about this idea that I wasn't going into anything medical. And my dad was very, very pleased with the fact that I just found a way to focus on something I really cared about. And so all of those things were threaded together. But when I applied to Yale and got in, I was like, oh, great. So I have 6 years paid fellowship of working on art. That's not what a PhD program is, guys. It's not. And I know that now, but I thought that was 23-year-old Imeh was like, oh, okay, I'll just paint. I'll draw and I'll paint. I'll work on things. I'll write a few papers. It's fine. It was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. It did not work out exactly as I expected, but it has literally created a pathway for me. So I feel like it was the right thing to do. You know, I've always had a job. And even in the recession, I was brought on board, but it was my art that opened up the avenue for me to teach at Westfield State University. I exhibited there and they learned about me. And then they brought me on board as an art historian. I've never taught a studio art course at Westfield. And so these things are all very intertwined. And I'm not upset about the decisions I made, but I do wonder, what if I just gone full-fledged all the way in?
Yeah.
You know, art all the way, MFA, where would I be now if I just trusted my instincts a little more and not let the traditions and heritage around me guide me? And you know, we'll never know.
Do you want to teach a studio course, or do you need an MFA to do
that? At my school, I'm almost certain. We have studio professors. Mm-hmm. So that's not really something I discuss. Mm-hmm. The worry for me, and the reason why this conversation about being an art historian and being a visual artist and being a professor of art history is an interesting one, is the concern for me is that my creative bandwidth, mm-hmm. that I'll somehow expend it greatly if I'm teaching art and creating art.
Got it.
If I'm in my studio working and then you go and you got to go teach your course and it's art history and you're teaching this historical aspect or this interpretation or even writing, I feel like I'm using a different kind of creativity to deliver that. And so the fear is coming into my studio after teaching a studio course, coming into my studio and looking at a piece of charcoal and saying, let me just go to sleep because I don't have it. And so I feel like this has been a really good setup for me so far. It's allowed me to be prolific in a way that I didn't expect. You know, I'm not publishing as much as I should as an art historian. But in place of that, I'm working on a very large body of artwork. And so that should mean something. It just, again, it's confusing on paper. It's like, well, you're an art historian, so okay, you published one book and here are some articles. Where are book 2, 3, and 4? And I'm like, you want to come to my studio? You know, so it's a weird thing. You know?
No, but I totally get it, man. It's like leg day. You know, it can't be everyday leg day. You know, you've got to go work out your chest muscles and so forth. And I think that there's a self-preservation aspect to this where I think you know that what you really have value. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm sure the kids love you, and you're doing an amazing job as a professor. But I think you're right to conserve. It's almost like there's a self-preservation where you want to conserve what's better. You want to use your powers of art, of creating art, for the right purpose, which is to share that and create art versus teaching. Because I could argue that these visual art students are watching your work and know your work and can learn from your work in that manner. They don't also need this to be in the studio course with you. But I hear you, man. You've got a lot to create. Now, I follow you on Facebook. We're friends on Facebook. And I don't want to gloss over this, but for those listening, this brother here is a brother of Alpha Phi Alpha, and he did he did undertake that journey while at Yale, which we're better for it, and we're really grateful that you're in the fellowship with us. But tell me a little bit about social causes, because there's a lot. I tell my team to wear the world like a loose garment, because we gotta lace up our boots and do the best we can every day. But it's been hard. There's been a lot going on, especially as a Black male, I can imagine. And how has that affected your artwork?
I think over the past year, what I'm calling the pandemic year, I feel like we have all of us have gone through something that's so unique, in that all of us, every single one of us alive, and there are a lot of us that are no longer alive, all of us have suffered some kind of loss. And for the first time in my lifetime, maybe ever, the entire world feels like it has been arrested. It paused, on pause. The sun has stopped moving, and I think in a way I see it as something magical, or mystical or spiritual, that in this paused state, not unlike, a shark floating in formaldehyde or something, right? In this paused state, this cloud has come over, and this cloud has covered us in darkness, and at the same time, it has literally lit up all of the screaming people who have been traumatized for generations. And so the biggest sense of loss that I feel right now is that this arrested state was and has been the perfect opportunity for people who have ever claimed to say they don't see what is happening. This has been the perfect opportunity for people to see it, acknowledge it, and want to jump on board to solve some of these problems. And I have watched, with tears, I have watched people who I thought I knew, in the face of this screaming, in the face of this hollering, turn their face and say, this is inconvenient for me. And so for me, the worry is this strange paradox, right? The world is about to open up. People are getting vaccinated. Gyms are opening up. People are going to go back to school. And I have this anxiety about the world reopening because I feel like there's this window of opportunity that is closing as the arrested become animated again. It is the strangest thing. The world is opening up because lives can now be saved again. Like, we can start over, but starting over means the arrested state is gone. And as an artist, what that has done for me is there is this expectation that in great trauma produces the best poetry. Trauma produces the best visual art. There's been this.
Look at the Renaissance, right? The Middle Ages, the Dark Ages,
right?
Medieval culture, but at the same time, you had masterpieces come out of that era,
right? And there is an expectation that happens. As an artist, I felt the pressure of that. But I also feel strangely liberated to just speak absolute truth in my works now in a way that maybe I hadn't before, and to not hold back. Because I just don't think, after the George Floyd video, which, by the way, I didn't watch, I've only seen the small clips that I quickly go by, I haven't watched it. I've decided that my art has to be a vehicle to allow people to talk about these things more and more, and unapologetically, and not that my art should be a vehicle to teach anybody anything, because I've also kind of simultaneously this year decided not to try to teach white people about racism anymore. They have to pick up this mantle and figure it out. For everybody, for every person over the last year, for every white person I know who has said something like, what about Black on Black crime? When they see somebody being suffocated to death over a 10-minute period, all I can think of is how much community work I have done just with the Brothers of Alpha alone to address the issue of Black on Black crime, to address issues of poverty, to address issues of destitution. This is literally my life's work. And I know so many other people in other organizations. We literally have tried, but white folks, too many white folks who have power, have remained silent in the face of our trying. And then after you see somebody prone on the floor, dying the way he did, once the riots start again, not sorry, I'm calling them riots too. Once the protests start again, and yes, maybe some burning starts again, the first thing that comes to your mind is to say, but what about Black on Black crime? I no longer feel apologetic. And so what that does as an artist is it allows me to harness, to garner, to literally to harvest all of the powers that I know exist in art making and image framing, to produce something that will speak and that absolutely may create chaos. I'm working on a portion of this series now, after the January 6th insurrection, that will be ready by the anniversary of that. We're going to talk about this, because we're past the point of America feeling like it could turn the page on some of the most remarkable times I've ever seen. I feel like we're really blessed to be in these spaces now. I saw the insurrection literally because I feel like the Capitol building is I treat it as a hallowed Black space. No, it's white. But I know who built the Capitol building, and I know the conditions under which slaves built that building. And so I saw that, and I know other people saw it, and that was a raid. That was another raid of a Black body. That Capitol building is a hallowed space because of the hands that built it. And so I am trying to figure out now what conversations to tell about this past year. That is what my current body of work is engaging. So to answer your question, and it's loaded, obviously, the answer, the pandemic, this arrested state has been in many ways an incubation for me, to kind of garner the energy and the strength that is going to take to unfold these next bit of stories, and I'm kind of excited about it.
That was deep, man. I never heard the insurrection described that way, and you know, I sense that the anxiety you spoke of is that once things open up, that we go back to normal when normal was not okay.
Yeah,
and the anxiety of the fact that while we were in this pause state, we could address some of these things, and that these things were on video. That murder that took place was literally, even if you were living under a rock, if you watched that, it encapsulated. It was in your face. There was no metaphor. There was no thinly veiled. It was a homicide on video, and what these protests have been about, and I think that Americans, we won't even get into how the rest of the world sees us, but Americans have a short memory. I'm in advertising and marketing. It's like, if things go back to normal, it's very likely that a lot of this stuff just gets swept under the rug and ignored again, and that we go back to the way things were. And I sense that that's where your anxiety is coming from, and I can't wait to see this. I don't know if this is the body of work that you mentioned.
No, no, it's not. It's not the body of work. The benediction series is something. Those are the two. You see these two big angels behind me here. This series here marks. It's a conversation. It's titled Benediction, and it's a conversation about a group of angels that are sent down from heaven for a season, and they are cast down to earth, and they have to wear the bodies of Black boys and men for a season so that they can serve as witnesses to precisely what these people are experiencing. And that is the series. There are images of large angelic figures listening to the ground for their brothers that are under the ground, and the blood of their slain brothers is still very much alive, crying for justice from the ground. And so there's a whole lot of biblical illusion and allusion and so on and so forth in the works. And obviously, I'm very interested in the prominence and the monumentality of the Black male figure, in lights, as spectacle, but as extremely beautiful, even in suffering. And so that's what these works are about. What has happened is the project has been interrupted by this other thing because of January 6th. And what I found is that the Benediction project and this other project are now coming together in a way that I hadn't expected, where architecture will be involved. And again, reimagining the Capitol building as a Black space. I know it's white on the outside, but the grounds of the Capitol building, we need to start rethinking how we consider these infrastructures, these spaces, these landmarks. The Capitol building is hallowed not because of old portraits of senators from the 1800s that hang in it. The Capitol building is a hallowed space because we know who built that thing. We know the conditions under which they built it. It is a Black space. And I think once you reimagine the Capitol building for what it actually is, I think it makes the insurrection, I think it makes it very clear what that was. And the erection of large crosses and the construction of large gallows on that Black body of the Capitol building takes on a new sense, and so that is where I am right now. And it's high time for us to be unapologetic about it.
Amen. Now, what our listeners really can't see is the scale of what you paint and what is the significance. I know clearly a lot of emotion goes into your work. Tell us about the amount of time you spend in the studio and the significance of the size of the body of works that you produce.
Yeah. I don't know how to describe how much time I spend in the studio. I'm always here. So I don't live here, but I have really comfortable couches here.
How does the wife feel about that?
Oh, she's cool with it to a degree. She's cool with it to a degree. She's got a studio space too, so she also does art. So it's I'm not always here, but there are limits. The paintings have grown quite large because I got into this studio space in 2018, right after doing this huge project on my campus that dealt with the death of Trayvon Martin. I did that project in response to a racist rash of incidents that happened on my campus. So after doing that project, my old studio space just felt too small. I needed something bigger. And this happened. It's a long story, I'm going to, but it happened. And so the walls in here, they changed size. Some of the walls in here, I think, are as high as 16 or 17 feet. And so for me, I walked in here and I was like, oh my gosh, like I can actually make these images, right? I can make them bigger. And so in many ways, the space has come to define, the sizes of the works. Like, this is a vertical building, let's build up. And so these were the first two big ones that I made. And now there's some that you can't see this one too well. Oh, well, anyway, your podcast can't hear it. There's one right to the end, to the side of me that's 10 feet, 12 feet wide, and so on and so forth. So the process of making them, the stains I put on them, I staple the canvases unstretched to the floor, and I make my designs, I draw on them, I put inks on them and all kinds of other things. And then once they're prepared to the degree that I'm satisfied, I take them and I reanimate them, put them on the walls, and I start making the figures.
Got it.
It's a pretty intense process. I feel like a carpenter sometimes as I'm working on these things.
Now, what is your media? Charcoal, and is it acrylic, or what are you using for? They tend to be monochromatic, although I have a few of your works, that have some color. But
yeah, I love to draw. And so charcoal is always a safe bet for me. But I do dabble in paint. I do dabble in oil paint. And so I use some of the larger ones I'm working on for the Benediction series are in oil. And I really make underpaintings. People who know how to paint look at my work and they're like, you never learned how to paint, did you? You know, so it's like, well, people who paint, look at my work, and it's like these are like large drawings. Even the way I use the oil paint, I use it the way a draftsman would use the paint. And I still keep saying I'm gonna take a painting class one day to really, really, really learn. I just never paid attention to paint because I like drawing so much. And so I always feel a little inept when it comes to paint. I know how to paint. Like if somebody said, "Hey, paint," or or "I'll kill your cat" or something, I'm like, "All right, I'll paint something." But in terms of the way, I don't think in a painterly way. Like you're a painter. I've seen your work. You think in a painterly way. You think in blocks and forms of color. I think linear, and I can turn this into volume if I want to. But because I like the drawing and the flatness, I may do something to make it flat again. And so it's interesting. And so I love working this way on the canvases because the structures created by the designs behind the images, behind the figures, allow me to. There's a flatness that will always be there because of the acrylic ink that's on it, and then I can create all the volume I want with the figures. And I like having the back and forth, the flatness and the volume at the same time. It does something aesthetically for me that I try to replicate that in my work.
no, I'm looking at your work. I've seen it. I would never guess it was oil because it looks to me like it's an ink wash of some sort.
Oh, you meant the colors in the background? Yes, those are ink washes.
Got it.
Sorry about that. Those are acrylic ink washes, and then the oil is what I'll do the bodies with.
Okay.
Sorry about that. No, you're absolutely right.
Gotcha. No, your work's amazing, and it's just I'm fascinated with the process and media, so I wanted to get some of that out there. You had this series about the little black girls. You didn't get
it's little nigger girls.
Yes, can you give us a little kind of synopsis on that?
Yeah, that was in 2015 is when I started working on that series. I got a grant from a research grant from my school, small grant, to put together this project. So I was working on my course in African American art, adding a segment on stereotypical images from history, and I stumbled upon this book titled 10 Little Nigger Girls, written by a British author. Her name is Nora Case, and it was written in 1907. And so I fell in love with the book, not because of what it was. It's an awful book, actually, that really, it's a counting book for children. So where it starts off with 10 girls and they'll be left with one girl at the end. And the girls are eliminated from the story. So kids learn how to count that way. But
what's happening to them to eliminate?
Girls are eliminated in these horrific ways. Like one is a bear, one is making candy with her sisters and is set on fire and she dies. And then others are a little more typical, like one gets married off. Again, but these are like little girls, right? And so it is this way of making fun of Black children, but the making fun of is a very dangerous kind of making fun of because it's turning them into it's dehumanizing them.
Right, and
so I was completely interested in that time in taking this story and redoing it. A number of things happened around that time. A year prior, the girls from the Chibok area of Nigeria had been kidnapped, mass kidnappings. Girls in Washington, D.C. were going every summer go missing. I was like, let's talk about real Black girls then. Let's have a conversation about that. But the historian in me is like, I want to use this book and I want to talk about real Black girl problems, and then the other big element here is that the book itself, 10 Little Nigger Girls, is based off of a minstrel song from the mid-1800s called 10 Little Injuns, where they would eliminate these Native Americans or native, that were native in Europe. It was a British minstrel song. The elimination, same thing. You know, one fell off the horse, broke his neck, and now they're 8, and so on and so forth. You know, 1 little, 2 little, 3 little Indians, 4 little, 5, and so on and so forth. So it's part of our culture. It's in our culture. And I was interested in how present this historical minstrel song is still in our culture, still. And so I was like, let's talk about this. And so I drew these girls in different situations, and I would entangle them in musical scores from the 1800s, and they're facing all of these different dangers, and these large black ink blots show up in the work, representing different kinds of dangers that the girls are encountering. So that's essentially what the project is. The fascinating part of the story that is how ingrained the story itself is in our culture. You know, Agatha Christie writes a book titled 10 Little Niggers, you know, which she later changes the title and it's called and Then There Was One. And the story is they find the book 10 Little Nigger Girls. They find the book 10 Little Niggers inside of a mansion. All these people that were invited to this mansion by some mysterious entity, and they start getting killed off one by one in the mansion. We've all seen versions of this movie.
Final Destination.
Yes. It's crazy because so many people know the story, but would never have guessed where it came from. It's like, wow, it's part of pop culture. You know, Family Guy does a rendition of Agatha Christie's 10 Little Niggers, you know, and it's like my students know about the Family Guy version. It's like, it's hilarious, but nobody knows that it starts off with a minstrel song from the 1800s. And so for me, this project is it's like everything. It literally shows how I operate as an art historian interpreter, as an artist creator, you know, and all of the things in between. I don't know if somebody else could have done this project quite like this, you know, because I am these various things, you know, in my field. And so I see the project, that and the fact that the project started and finished. God, it's hard to finish a project. That I feel like the project was successful.
Awesome, man. Tell me, as we're getting closer to the home stretch, any big acquisitions, any big news you want to share, any exciting?
Yeah, there is. It hasn't fully happened, so I can't give all.
Yeah, right. We have to be careful, but
right. I can't give all the. I will say this. 2 things that are happening, and I'll be quick. Number one, I did just get word that there is a foundation. I'll just say the foundation. It is an accredited foundation that collects African American art, and they have some big names in their collection. I believe they own an Elizabeth Catlett. I know they own they have some names. They have big names from like 20th century, 21st century artists. They have them, and they have tapped one of my pieces to be brought into their collection.
Congratulations.
So thank you so much. I see it as a big deal. It's from the Benediction series, and they were very interested in the story of the Benediction project, especially as something that is a right now kind of the urgency of right now, this project. The other big thing that's happening, and I can talk about this a little more, is another piece, a separate piece from the Benediction series, called Landing Angel. This is Angel listening to the ground and his wings are sprouting up into the air. That piece has been selected into a very large exhibition that's going to be touring in the fall, titled Visible Man. So I'm pretty stoked about that. And so right now I'm working out the logistics of like everything, like how do I get the work to them? And they're large works. I got to get them photographs. I have a feeling I won't see that once that painting goes off to that exhibit. I just have a feeling it's not coming back to my studio. So it's going to travel to a few places. That's the goal. And I'm really just terribly excited. Again, the exhibition list, the people who are going to be in that show, I just looked at it and I was like, are y'all sure you want my piece of the show? So I am extremely excited about this because these things happen at the right time, the way they're supposed to, you know? And so this feels like all of these things are kind of lining up with this project, not for my glory or anything. I think it's because there's a story that needs to be told. And right now, my work is meeting the moment, and I'm really excited about it.
Awesome. Now, are you seeing an uptick or interest in socially charged art? Like, are people contacting you because they know that there's so much emotion in it, or is it been steady throughout the pandemic?
Oh, you mean uptick in people just interested in my work?
The demand in this kind of socially charged, or even
Oh,
just an interest in Black male artists or Black male art.
there has been some of that. I will say this: my studio has thrived over this pandemic. I would not have thought that, but there's been an uptick in art buying.
Mhm.
I think people were looking for things to consider. One collector of really large commission, um, uh, he was tired of staying in his house and looking at his walls, and he's this is a Black man, and he also was interested in supporting Black artists, and he had never collected original art before, but he grew up in art, and he's like, it's time for me to start my collection. And he selected my work from uh, several different artists who, an art consultant had given him. They learned of me, and he's like, that's what I want. And I ended up making two pieces for his home. And so there's been so much growth in the last year that I feel extremely grateful. And I feel that growth, the requirement for me now is to figure out why that has happened over the last year and how I can help others along the way in the years, once the world opens up after the pandemic. I'm looking forward to it. I'm a little nervous, especially about this upcoming project I'm working on. I'm a little nervous to see how everything will come together. So, yeah.
Well, I'm excited to see this come to fruition, and I can't wait till I can view some of this. And you inspire me, man. You inspire me to paint. I'm currently working on my book, which has to come out this year. I think once I can get that out the door, I do want to take you up on coming up, and we'll do some studio time together. I think that would be awesome.
I would love that.
Yeah, that we keep saying it, but it's gonna happen. Everything in its due time. Uh,
Yes.
so you mentioned the acquisition from the foundation and private collector. Give a little shout out to our folks out there that are now obviously rushing to see your works or get familiar with your works or buy your works. How can they contact you? What is the best way? What is your sales funnel, as we call it? What does that look like?
Well, this is where I would wish I could say, well, go to my website, which is being designed by, by the amazing Peralta Design, but it's not done yet, and it's my fault because it's so busy. It's not their fault, folks. This thing would have been done 6-7 months ago. So I have been so busy. But what I will tell you is I think right now the best way to see, I call it my online gallery, is on my Instagram. And it's just IMO IMEH. So at IMO IMEH. That's at Imo Imeh. And you can also find me on Facebook the same way. If you just type my name in, Imo Imeh, on Facebook, I have a page which you can like, and you can follow my works there for now. But there will be an unfolding of the website, and I think it's just going to be it's going to be in time for everything that's happening in the fall, certainly, and I'll be happy to direct people there at that time. So.
Awesome. Give our young budding artists out there some encouragement. How would you motivate a young artist looking to break into the art world?
The post-pandemic world right now is dry and thirsty for something new and fresh. Do not worry about whether or not people will like your work. Right now, produce art, make it, post it, talk about it, feed it to the masses, because the masses need it. And those things that you put out there will serve as seeds for the post-pandemic world. The world desperately needs what it is you are doing right now. Don't doubt it, just believe it, make the work, and put it out there. That will be your contribution to the next generation. That is what you need to do right now.
Thank you, brother Imo. I just want to say, I love you, my brother. You're an amazing human being. And thank you for making the time to be on our show. I'm sure it's going to inspire a lot of people.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. This is really therapeutic. Got a lot off my chest.
Yes.
You know, thank you so much, brother. Thank you for this.
Thank you. Thank you for being on here. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Mission Control. Until next time, this is Ramon Peralta from Peralta Design, and we launch brands.
Thank you for taking this journey with us. To learn more about Peralta Design and our work, go to www.peraltadesign.com and subscribe to keep up with the crew.